latest episode of the interviews with Richard Windman. I am Richard Windman, and we are talking today with Luke Wiersma. He's a young man who wants to tell his survivor story. We do a lot of shows here. We have subject matter experts on childhood sex abuse. Um, and it's always, we're always proud and we're always welcoming these subject matter experts, but the real where the rubber meets the road and where we learn the most about survivors of childhood sex abuse is from the survivors themselves. And before we start, I want to make sure that I make it very, very, very clear that Luke is not a victim of childhood sex abuse, but he's a survivor of childhood sex abuse. And one of his dreams is to become an advocate for other survivors. And I think that you'll see this throughout the progression of victims to survivors to warriors. That's what I call them. I call them warriors. You'll see that victims and survivors are selfless. They're selfless. They're not selfish. And so what they want to do is they want to tell their stories and they want to get out there and they want to be advocates and they want to help. They want to help in any way that they can other victims of childhood sex abuse. I think is a beautiful thing. And with that, I welcome you, Luke.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you. So, a good place to start is the beginning. Where do you start? The beginning, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about you and who you are, where you come from, and stuff like that. We don't have to get into the abuse right now, but let us know about you and who Luke really is.
I'm 38, from Dyer, Indiana. Um, I mean, I grew up in a pretty normal household, um, just like most people. It never occurred to me, honestly, that something like this could happen, but it did. And, like I said, I've told you this before, Richard. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not afraid. It's my story. Um, and people, take it how you want to take it, I guess. It like you said, this is really, it is where the rubber meets the road. Um, where the truth comes out about it is from actual survivors. So, you know,
Yeah. So, what did you want to be when you grew up, man?
I mean, I feel like I'm already grown up, but
You are, but
oh yeah.
where did you want to be?
When I grew up, I wanted to actually be a neuropsychologist. So someone that worked with people that uh TBI, stuff like that.
Traumatic brain injury.
You know,
Yep.
people who've had strokes. I wanted to work with people like that.
Interesting. And do you feel that because we'll get to what happened to you in a second, but did you feel that the trauma that you went through had any effect on your ability or your how do you say it? Did you think that it affected your life's potential?
Yeah, I feel it significantly did. It wasn't until, I'd say, after the abuse that I really got into drugs and, alcohol, because I didn't want to feel the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, we see that in in victims and survivors all the time. You know, my experience and what I've learned from everybody else is that 1 second, please. is that we live a life of misplaced shame and guilt. And because it's a secret, we can't tell anybody. And when that happens, we can't ask for help. And that we tend to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. And that was your story as well.
It was, and suffice it to say, that story ended up eventually, honestly, leading me to prison too, where I saw some significant stuff too. You know, the actual amount of victims in there even
Hmm.
surprised me.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it any wonder that, a lot of pedophiles, they succumb to their very last moment on earth because there's so many victims in the penal system?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They get picked on, abused, sexually abused, um,
Mm.
manipulated in any way they can. Um, you know, there was, people that would rig their commissary to get extra, make them pay taxes just because what they were.
Just because of what they were.
No,
Wow.
they had to pay to live in the prisons.
Right. And so just to be clear, I want to make everything very, very clear is that your time in prison didn't have anything to do with pedophilia.
No, it didn't.
No. All right. So that's very, very important because there's a nasty rumor going around that victims of childhood sex abuse will grow up to be offenders themselves.
Yeah.
I reject that 100%. I don't know how you feel, Luke, but because I was a child sex abuse survivor, if I was to ever hurt a child, I would just put a bullet in my head.
I 100% agree. And it's not like I didn't want to hurt the pedophiles while I was in there, even because I did. I wanted to succumb to those urges to beat them, but I didn't because I would have gotten extra time, and it wasn't worth it to me to do that.
So, so the satisfaction wasn't worth it.
It would have been satisfying, yeah, but I would have gotten 5 extra years just for hitting one of them, much less what I wanted to do to them.
I bet. How miserable is it to be in jail? How miserable is it to be in jail and be surrounded with pedophiles in the penal system?
It's bad. Um, I mean, they're all over, and a lot of them brag about it. I met more than one um, that just had no problem talking about what they did. One was a rabbi,
Mm.
and he was proud to talk about it to whoever he could. And
About
one,
its pedophilia?
yeah, and one was a Boy Scout leader, and they just wanted to talk about it. And I, it gets to that point where you just got to walk away from them and be like, you know what, fuck you. I don't want to talk to you. You come near me, I'm gonna hit you.
Right,
You give them ample warning, or I gave them ample warning that I
mm,
wasn't gonna take that shit.
right. And by the way, you can curse on this show. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah,
We're telling stories. So let's get into your abuse only if you want to.
yeah.
So
Um,
tell us
so
about the beginning and how it went and where it ended. I don't know if you got justice for that, but if you can just tell the story.
unfortunately, no justice was actually served. But I'll go to the beginning. Um, I was 16 when it started, and she was 22. So this continued. It was 16 to 18. And I think in the end, really, it was more I just aged out than anything.
Mhm.
Um, but it started slow. She'd just give us drugs, give us alcohol, She was supplying us to, I don't know, get us to a certain point, I guess. She was, I don't know how to describe it, honestly.
Was she a friend of
Manipulating.
the
She was
family?
manipulating.
She
She
was a
was
friend
a
of the family?
friend of my friend's family.
Friend of your friend's family.
Yeah. One of my high school friends. And he was actually abused by her too. Um, I'm not gonna be able, I'm not gonna go into his story either, but
Mm.
I would say he at some point did attempt to commit suicide, as well as I did. I attempted 4 times. But back to the beginning a little. So it started off slow, just her feeding us drugs, alcohol, a little bit at a time. Um, I already somewhat had a little bit of a issue with drugs, but not a lot. I would say it was probably not even a year before she started actually having sex with us. And I don't remember a lot because I was on drugs that she gave me. I was on the alcohol, but the stuff I remember distinctly was being held down
Mhm.
while she's on top of me. I remember a lot of banging noises, like someone that was excited banging on a metal. It was in a park bathroom
Mm.
where this every time it occurred, it was in a park bathroom.
Always in a park bathroom.
You know,
Why is
right by
she couldn't bring you home? Couldn't
she
take a hotel?
she was smart about it.
And
I would
she-
have to give her that. She didn't want us to know a lot of information about her. We didn't know where she lived. Uh, I knew what she looked like, but I didn't know where she lived. I really didn't know a whole lot about her other than her first name. Didn't even know her last name.
Really?
You know, um, it, I think back and how disturbing that is. that she was that smart to keep little shit from us just so that we would know those and be able to go after her.
Mhm.
Um, like I said, it continued 16 to 18. Um, she at one point forced us to have sex with each other as well.
Oh,
Uh,
you're talking male on male stuff, right?
right.
So she wouldn't. It wouldn't be
She
just one victim. It would be like several, like in a party type setting.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right.
Most of the time I was either on alcohol or heroin.
Mm.
Um, that's or coke. That's she was giving us various concoctions, of course. Um, and you know, everything really was a blur. Just I know what happened. Um, I still have nightmares about it. The park where it happened, I can't even drive past that park.
Really?
It fucks with me.
So, okay, I'm gonna go on a list of questions just
Okay.
based on what you said so far. So, this occurrence to you, even though it was by a woman, only some years above your age, but an adult, it was so traumatic to you that you couldn't even go past the park without having some type of reliving your trauma.
Right. No, I still don't. I don't like going past that park at all.
All right.
It's just I don't know. Um, just something that's always sticking in my mind every day
Yeah.
is that, you know, it, you know what the craziest part of it is when I was younger, I used to play volleyball in that very same park.
Mhm.
I used to play sports in that park.
Wow. And can you do that again or no?
No.
No. But you could go to any other park, couldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. If it as long as it doesn't have the same, I guess the same contextual setup,
Mhm.
because that I feel like that might trigger me as well.
Mhm.
You know, it's like the way the park was set up. I can kind of picture it. It's the playground was on the far end,
Mhm.
and where it happened, there was a volleyball court next door, and then the brick bathrooms, men, the women, and then the middle was like facilities or whatever you call it.
Sure.
And that's it would either happen in the men's bathroom or in the facilities area because they always left that open.
Right. I'm going to ask you a hard question. Are you open to a hard question?
I am.
Okay. So there might be, I doubt it, but there might be some listeners out there that would say to you, uh, hey, you know what? Um, you had a 20-something-year-old woman who wanted to have sex with you, and she did. And now you're complaining about it. What are you, some kind of faggot? What would you say to those people?
No, not at all. Like I said, my story is my story. You can take it however you want. But at 16 years old, I definitely could not consent. And then I was under the influence every time she raped me.
Of substances? Yes.
Yep. So there was no way possible for me to even consent to it. So what she did was illegal. There's no two ways around that.
Right.
And she knew what she was doing was illegal.
Right.
That's why she was hiding it.
Is she still alive today?
Yeah. I don't know where she's at. Um, John Anderson actually hooked me up with the lawyer. We tried to locate her. I made a police report, but we couldn't locate her, so no justice.
No justice.
Um, at 21, while I was drunk, I went out and looked for her. And my plan that night was to kill her. I'll be honest about that. My plan that night was to kill her, but it was snowing. Um, and I said it plenty times before. And again, some people might not agree with this. I do believe there's a God out there, and that He stopped me from making a big mistake that night because that would have ended up with me in prison for the rest of my life.
Yeah, so a lot of victims and survivors go through that as well. They wish death upon the person that abused them. But and again, I'm playing devil's advocate. You know me. I'm super
Yes,
hard on this stuff. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate. You know, she's a woman. She's just like 5 years older than you. Why do you want to kill her? I mean, most boys your age would love to have sex with an older woman. What was different about you?
the trauma.
Trauma.
I'd say definitely the trauma that she caused. It wreaked havoc on my life.
Right.
Um, I quit heroin at 19, but I continually drank, used cocaine
Mm-hmm.
just to not not relive those experiences and try to get away from them.
Yeah.
Um, for so long, I've been through rehab multiple times.
Me too. Join the club
And
5 times here.
yeah, I'd say about four. I've been through. One was court ordered. They helped, but I still struggle. Uh,
Of course.
I admit that I still struggle with substance abuse issues. I still struggle with dreams, nightmares.
That's the one thing that you can't control is the nightmares. I mean, they're gonna come or they're not gonna come, and there's nothing
Correct.
you fucking do about it, right?
I agree. And that's something I would tell anybody that's out there that's listening that has not gotten help for this is first off, it wasn't your fault. None of it.
Fine. That's right.
And this things like situational awareness help. But like post-traumatic stress disorder, you can't control those feelings, the depression, you can't control. Suicide, the wanting to commit suicide. I don't know about everybody. I know I've attempted, like I said, I've attempted 4 times. Thank God it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I would have never I get to see my niece and nephew grow up every day.
So let's talk about that for just a second. Let's talk about suicide if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Um, I can tell you that, in my story, when I was 19 years old, I attempted suicide. I called it, I killed myself. I don't even call it attempted suicide because I had the intention. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a cry for help. I did not want to be here anymore. I didn't want to be here anymore. And I planned out my death perfectly. There was I was born and raised in New Orleans, and there was an oak tree on Napoleon Avenue, big magnificent live oak tree, probably 300 years old. And I wanted to die at the bottom of that oak tree. And when I committed suicide, I took a bottle of my mom's Cinequan, which is called Doxepin. That's the actual chemical name. I took a bottle of 60 of them and I just chug-a-lugged it. And that made me wind up in a charity hospital in New Orleans, 5 days in a coma. And I was, for lack of a better term, man, I was disappointed when I woke up, and I was okay. And if you're willing to share your story about your suicide attempts, I'd love to hear them if you're willing to share.
Oh. So the first time, every time I was drunk. I'll put that out. So every time I was drunk, the first three, I attempted to hang myself. The rope broke each time.
Mm.
Don't know how or why, but the rope broke. I was disappointed. I would say that I was very disappointed that it happened. But I just started planning it more. Um,
Yeah.
the first 3 times were I would say, well, the first couple of times, or at least, were more of a cry for help than anything. Um, After the second time, it wasn't anymore. After the second time, it was I really wanted to be dead. I didn't want to be here anymore. You know.
Yeah.
Third time, again, that was the hanging. The rope broke. The fourth time, I had a loaded gun. Glock. I remember specifically to my Glock 19. Put it to my head. One in the chamber too. One in the chamber. My sister-in-law walked in. I had forgot to lock the door.
Wow.
I was in such a drunken stupor. I forgot to lock the door. If that didn't happen, I wouldn't be here. But I wouldn't have started getting the help either. Because it was after that I really started looking into getting help too. Um,
Now,
I started going to AA. I was sober for a while, 5 years. Um, Relapsed. I've relapsed. I don't know how many times now, but I just gotten to talk to psychiatrists and actually understand really that none of this was my fault.
right.
Uh, that's when after all those attempts is when I really finally started to understand that none of this is my fault. As much as I wanted to die still. It's not my
Yeah,
fault.
it's not. No, it was never your fault. So we have some questions coming in. Uh, and one of our viewers is being a devil's advocate as well. And I've heard this before as well. You're 16 years old. They offer you drugs. Why didn't you say no?
I don't know. I don't have an honest answer for that. Um, I think it was my friends were doing it, so I should too. Yeah, it's like that old saying, if your friends are gonna jump off a bridge, are you go too? But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was crazy. I had all the peer pressure, I guess, going on, and I was somewhat troubled anyway when I was younger. So, it was just something to do. Was getting high.
Okay. We have another question as well from Joseph Scambra. Scambra. He's a mega advocate for childhood sex abuse. His question to you is, how is your relationship with women now? Can you ever trust anybody?
That's a tough question. Yes and no. I've been engaged a couple of times with women, but my relationships never seem to work out. I have a lot of trust issues with women. I do. Just talking to women for me is hard. Like it, say I want to ask a girl out, right? Doing that for me is one of the hardest things for me to do because I have so many trust issues.
Right. Well, the natural progression in the victim survivor community is trust is a very, very rare and valuable commodity. When we get betrayed or raped at such a young age, our frontal cortices are still growing. So we have our animal brain, which we're born with, and the rest of our brain is developing, and it doesn't stop developing until we understand now, 25 years, and so that's that that's a big disruptor. I don't know if I would call it disruptor. Yeah, we'll call it a disruptor, because there's a relationship between the amygdala and your frontal cortices where your reason and logic happens. And so in a normal brain, your amygdala says, "Hey, let's go screw something up. Let's go smoke some dope. Let's go do something." And then your frontal cortex says, "Listen, there's consequences to that. You go to jail. Your family's going to see you like that." And so the brain logics back and forth. But in victims of childhood sex abuse, the frontal cortices and the neural pathways are not established or stunted. And so that's why we make those bad decisions all the time. The amygdala wins all the time. The amygdala is responsible for our fight, flight, and freeze and fawn responses. And that's where we live. When you're abused as a child and you don't have your frontal cortices that work for you, you go back to your primal brain, your midbrain, and you fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That's what you do. And the worst part about that, Luke, is that when you're in that state, and we're in that state all the time, is that cortisol gets released from our brain, and cortisol is what helps us survive, and it's supposed to be in and out of your system as soon as the danger passes. But with us, it stays there, and it stays there, and we're constantly at that posture. And what's really bad about that is, when you have cortisol in your system, your fingernails and your hair stop growing, and because you don't need that when you're surviving. But it also, what it does is it compromises the immune system. And when that happens, that's when we get heart disease. That's when we get cancer. And I don't know if you know this, but in the survivor community, we have a higher propensity or incidence of premature health physiological maladies.
I didn't know that. Sorry, I didn't know that. Yeah, I like on one instance, I was say, okay, that explains a lot, but I can't. Again, I don't want to use it for excuses as an excuse for some of the mistakes I've made, but it does explain a lot. Like me going to prison.
Well,
It, it,
we know that about survivors. Survivors will participate in riskier behaviors.
yeah,
That's what we know. We only know about surviving. We don't know about peace. We don't know about logic. We don't know about reason. The only thing we know about is what's happening to us and what's happening to us right now. And that explains why we participate in risky behaviors.
yeah, it does. It's that's something. It's interesting. I'd love to see. I'm gonna actually do more studies on that too, because that to me is really interesting. Yeah, I dabble every now and then in psychology. My focus now is more on, of course, the trauma
Yeah.
for in this, especially just sexual trauma, um, and how it affects us. So knowing that, I'll definitely do more research on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a psychologist, but I've been studying psychology and neuroscience for 10 years and 7 months now. And I can tell you that when you look at prison populations, or if you look at victim or survivor populations, when you look at substance abuse, nobody drinks because they like the taste of beer.
Yeah.
Nobody likes that. And so it goes back to some kind of underlying trauma that we had typically in our childhood. Everything, the way that we act, the way that we do, and the way that we were brought up. And so, man, don't kill yourself over that. It wasn't your fault. Even your trauma happened as a child, and there's no excuse for it, but it happened, and that's responsible for some of your behaviors. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I can go into a prison or walk into a child support, not even child support. I can just walk into a rehab, into a group setting, and I can go, you are an abuse victim, and you are, and you are, and you are. And they might protest, but they'll say, but I'll say, but I'll say, then why do you drink? There's nothing glamorous about it. You have to go out, you have to plan around it, you have to do all of these things. And that's really the reason why. And risky behaviors and criminal, even criminal behaviors, you can go into jail and you can look at all of these prisoners and you can go back and explore their childhood, and they commit crimes for a reason.
I agree. Um, when I was in the penal system, I think it was 50 something percent of those guys in there were victims.
Mm-hmm. And that's
And
why they have a hard on for pedophiles when they come into prison. They want to take care of them, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So we have some dead air here. Um, so you have this dream, or at least a willingness to become a advocate. Tell us about that.
Oh, I've done this. I've been doing this for like it just interviews, I think, for about a year or so now.
Mhm.
Um, I've done some interviews for a couple of different so I did one for NASCA and then one on Spotify, two on Spotify. One was on uh actually was on a PTSD. It was a PTSD panel. And just something about it makes me want to, the more I delve into it, the more I want to help. The more I want to be able to reach out to those people and be like, look, this I've been through this too. It isn't your fault. I want to help you. Let me be there for you. Um, let me, even if it's just a shoulder to cry on, you know, I'm here for you.
Right. And do you
It,
believe
it's
that that helps you along with your healing as well?
it does. It does. And it is not necessarily about me. It in a sense it is, yes, because it helps me with my healing, but it's giving myself out to others and being able to help someone else who's been through the same shit I've been through and seeing someone else progress and grow to to be able to live their life even though this happened to them is something I think is just helpful to someone else.
Right. Well, that's the work that we can do. But what is your vision for victims and survivors, or just for the problem in general? So, if you want to be an advocate, or what do you look towards? What is your beacon of hope? Or what is it that you want to accomplish?
Hmm.
And I'm not talking one-on-one support. I'm talking about what. So you're going to be forward looking, and you're going to be a leader in the movement. What do you see as a possible solution or a stopgap or something that we can do to battle this problem?
I mean, it's definitely something that needs to be stopped. It we see it all over the media, that this stuff is happening. Um, so I think just the more people that come forward, the more we can put a stop to it. Honestly, um, the more people that say, "Okay, this happened to me too," it's our time to come forward. It's our time to stop this shit from happening to someone else's kid.
Right. And so we look at ourselves and the relief that we need, and also advocates. If we're doing our job right, we are doing this so that our kids don't have to suffer in the future. But you talk specifically about coming forward and telling your story. Tell us about what the process was and how you felt, and whether you felt that coming forward and saying something was beneficial or not.
I mean, at first there was a lot of fear, in it. Um, the first time I did it, I was really nervous about it. Um, but the as the process went on, as I went on, the more I told my story, the more I shared it with people, and the more support I saw that I had, that's where the ball started rolling. It was like, all right, there's there's gotta there's gotta be more to this. You know, I gotta put my story out there. I gotta let people know this is it. Not just men on men, or men doing this to children, whatever, but women do this too. Women do definitely do this.
How did you feel when you told your story for the first time, coming out of it, the back end? How did you feel?
Amazing. Uh,
Amazing, really?
Relieved. Um, it was like a weight was off my shoulders. Finally.
Wow,
Um, I guess there's still some hesitancy there, but it was more joy than anything.
really, joy.
Yeah,
When
just
I did
being
my
able to
first
get it
time,
out.
it was like the cat's out the bag. I can't do anything, so I felt kind of stuck.
Yeah, I mean, it did. At some point I did kind of feel like I got stuck in a rut. Um, but it was like, all right, I can get out of this. There's little shit that did happen. Like I would get depressed every once in a while, or a bad dream, or you know, um, one of my friends, she's a hugger. And there was some hesitancy there too. Um,
So she's a hugger and you didn't like hugging.
I'm not a big hugger, especially with women.
Well, we haven't met in
Um,
person yet, but the first thing I would do is hug you. So I'll refrain from doing that when we meet.
uh, but I'm getting past that too. I am. I think, and part of that was actually just coming out with everything. And like I said, it was a relief. Getting all this shit that I've had on my shoulders for years. You know, just finally getting that shit off my shoulders and be like, fuck, that feels really good. And it kind of becoming telling my story became sort of like an addiction in a sense, where I wanted to do it more and more and more. Um, not
Really?
ne-
That's crazy. I like that.
it was a unique experience for me. I
Let me,
love telling it.
you love telling it.
It to certain people. Obviously, like people at work not going to understand. There's some people
Sure.
that
Yeah.
understand.
I got that.
Some
I
people,
got that at my old boss.
some people not so understanding. Obviously, there's playing devil's advocate, like you said. People are like, "Oh, you were 16, she was 22. Why didn't you just fuck her?" Obviously,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
people do that. And yeah, I can kind of understand that, but like I say, if you don't want to hear my story, that's fine. If you want to
Right.
take my story that way, fine.
Yeah.
I don't have to talk to the people that are going to talk shit about my fucking story either.
Right.
I can always walk away. I'm at that point now. I'm no longer angry or ashamed of it. I'm no longer.
But when you came forward for the first time and you told your story, didn't you feel a little bit of anger? Because I see
Oh
that.
yeah.
I
Oh
see
yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah.
In other words, when it's not a secret anymore.
Um, that the first couple of times, I know the first couple of times I cried. I lost my temper. Um, just there's a lot of mixed emotions. But
Yeah.
like as it progresses, you finally are out. You're finally telling your story. People are finally hearing you talk about what actually happened to you. It for me it was a unique experience, and something I wanted to continue doing.
Hmm. Let me ask you this. You came forward, you were very brave and courageous. And I just want to tell the listening audience that when you have a secret that deep and you live in a world of self-imposed shame and guilt, which is misplaced, it's very, very, very hard to tell your story for the very first time. And you've obviously done that, Luke, and you've done it many times. And you are an advocate. I don't know if you know that or not, but you
Yeah.
are an advocate. Um, but what was the fallout? What were the consequences, the fallout for you telling your story? How were you crucified, or were you?
I wasn't really.
No?
I mean, there's some people at work that know my story and they'll talk shit about it. Yeah. Like I said, I walk around. I'll walk away from those people. I don't give a fuck. I'll walk away from those people. Um, there's some people who I've told my story to, and their response was, I am so sorry that happened to you."
No.
And that was a guy at work who said that. He was just like, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." But for the most part, I don't feel like I've been crucified for it. I I I feel like I've gotten a lot of positive reaction and a lot of positive reinforcement of, you know, people just understanding that this did happen and being there for me.
So everything that you've been through, and it's so hard, and you have such a positive outlook. This sounds like a stupid HR question if you're applying for a job, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You have such a positive outlook, and you've come along so way. I've known you for about a year, and you've come along so well. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Besides celebrating the anniversary of me asking you this question.
5 years. That's a I mean, obviously I wanna continue doing this. Hopefully hosting some meetings um for SCSA.
Okay.
Uh Maybe I'll do a podcast myself. Um I'm working on a book, so that's I gotta finish. I want to finish that.
Mm.
Um it just tells my story. It's the same. It goes into some detail. So it's not I mean, I didn't go into a lot of detail. Like that book, just to write it, what I have written, I think I only have 5 chapters written. Took maybe 7 months for me to write, trying to remember every detail, trying to talk talk through it with my editor because I had someone editing it, and dealing with the emotions as I'm writing it too.
Yeah, I'm writing a book too. Mine's almost finished, but I was in a place where, I'm not a professional writer, so I don't have writer's block, but it's just so painful to put pen to paper to actually tell it. I already wrote the book in my head. I just could just blah, 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 blah it out. But then you have to strike the balance too. When you write about abuse, is it going to be an informative, encyclical for people to learn, or is it going to be a pornography piece that pedophiles use to jack off to?
Right.
And yeah, so it's a balancing act. You don't want to get too graphic, but you want to have the maximum input too. And yeah, so writing a book is very, very, very difficult for us, isn't it?
Especially, yeah, on this subject, yeah. I mean, I could write a book about some bullshit, but as far as writing my story out, I don't want it to be some cyclical bullshit that, a pedophile is going to use to jerk off to either. Like you said,
Right.
uh, I want it to be my story, yet informative. I want it to be something that survivors read and understand.
Wow. Well, you have an incredible story. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Um, our show is in the infancy too, so you're like our number 17 guest. Um, this stuff is really, really hard to talk about, and I commend your bravery and your courage for doing so. Coming forward and talking about this stuff is not the easiest thing in the world to do, and it's not because it's a tough subject, but you have to consider other things like, am I going to be well received? Are my kids going to hate me? Is my wife going to hate me? Is my boss going to fire me because I'm a victim of childhood sex abuse? I went through that.
No,
And
I try to look at the positives. As far as like the boss thing, I mean, I feel like there should be some legal standing as far as that goes. I don't know if there is. That
no,
they can't fire you over some shit like that, but I don't think
well,
there
they'll
is.
they'll fire you for different reasons, but
Yeah.
the reason the way I worked for IBM, and my boss was none too happy that I went public with my story. Uh, he said, "God damn it, Richard! Did you have to say that you worked for IBM?" And but it worked to his disadvantage because IBM actually pays SCSA, our organization. They match dollar for dollar their employees' contributions, and so he really didn't have a moral standing there. While he was vomiting that bullshit, people in my company were making contributions to our cause, so it didn't work to his advantage. But that's not the case in every work environment. When a victim and a survivor comes forward, they have all kinds of things to consider. Am I going to feel good? Or am I going to feel bad? Is this going to be therapeutic, or is this going to set me back? What's my family going to think? What's my son? What's my daughter? What's my wife going to think about it? I'll tell you that when I went forward, I got divorced, because she said that I wasn't going to bring that shame on my family, and so of course I had to replace her with a newer unit. Uh, sorry, I make it harsh, but
Yeah,
my
I
my,
love it.
my kids understood. My boss hated it, um, and and that just goes to there's empowering, but also when you take a victim or a childhood sex abuse survivor and you subject them to that, you're covering it up because you want them to keep the secret. You don't want it to be public. You don't want it to be known, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I went through that. Uh, like we talked about before, the suicide attempts. I've gotten death threats. I've gotten 3 death threats for
Jeez.
telling my story. And so it's a really hard thing to do. But I think the most important thing to remember is that children, children suffer from childhood sex abuse. And if we don't, as adults, tell our stories and let everybody know exactly what happened to us, then that will happen to your children too. And
I
that's
agree.
something that we do not want. It's the reason why I wake up every day and I tell these stories, and Luke comes on and tells his story. Because if we don't say anything, it will happen again, and it will happen again. Not to my children are adults now. It will happen to your children. And that's something that we need to stop right now. We've had pedophiles for as long as the life has been happening on earth. But we can stand up today and say no more. No more. Pedophiles need to go into a box or wherever they go to outside of society and be away from our children. Because I know a lot of children. I work cadet programs, I have grandchildren, and I look into their eyes, and if anything ever happened to them, I would just kill a motherfucker.
Yeah.
But we exist in a civilized society today where we have laws on our side, where we can stand up and say, no more, no more. We can be better parents. Stop using Boy Scouts of America and the church as your free babysitting service. Don't do it. Spend time with your kid. Throw the ball with your kid. Attend your daughter's tea party. Be present. These are the things that you can do to stop the curb childhood sex abuse right now. So why aren't we doing it? You've heard our horrible stories. There's nothing I can do. I can't take it back. It happened. That's what it is. So listen to these voices. Listen to Luke's voice. Plied with alcohol, drugs. Same here. You weren't paying attention, parents. Luke, we're at the end of the hour. What would you like to say? You want to plug anything? You have a nice hairdo. Where do you get your hair cut? Get the
I
guy.
don't. I don't.
You do. You look good,
I'm
man.
just letting it grow, honestly.
Brother.
How much I grow it long? A metal style.
Yeah. All right.
Oh,
Metal style?
metal style.
Where you going
Metal
for?
head.
You going for the Hetfield, or where you going for Gene Simmons? What are
Uh,
you looking for?
Headfield.
Hetfield?
The Hetfield, yeah.
Okay.
Always Metallica fan, you know.
I know. That's why I mentioned.
Yeah.
Wow, this was an incredible interview, man. I thank you for coming on and being so honest and just so, man.
I'm just glad I could do it, man. And like you said, this shit's gotta stop. It's gotta stop now.
Yeah.
It
You're a breath
does.
of fresh air. You know that, right?
I appreciate that.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, brother. We're gonna wrap it up.
All right.
Anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
Nothing I can think of
Okay.
other than if you have this, if this has happened to you, this is the one thing I can say. If this has happened to you and you haven't come forward, we're here. We're here to help you. We
Thank you.
got we got meetings. We'll
Yeah.
help you.
Yeah. We circle the wagons. We don't let anybody down in our organization. No, we don't. Where do you get that from?
The vape.
No.
What?
Where do you get that goodness in your fucking heart? Where you say that you'll stand up for other people and you will circle the wagons
I I think it's
and you
just
want to do more
the
for
way I
them.
was raised.
Where
You
you
know, I
raised.
was raised to be a good person, and yeah, bad shit happened to me. But despite the fact that bad shit happened to me, I'm determined to not let that shit get me down. I'm not. You know, I let it get me down for so long, but I'm not allowing that anymore. I'm trying to keep positive about my life now.
Yes, sir. All right. Ready to play bass on the way out? Metallica head? Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.